Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in the Harvard Classic Lectures. This is lecture number 21 over Paradise Lost, book 7. One of my favorite books. It's interesting to me sometimes that book 7 has been labeled by any number of people as one of the more boring books of Paradise Lost. And I'm sorry, I just do not understand that. This is a book that's just filled with joy, and I want to try and share that with you. And by the end of our lecturing, and I'm hoping that maybe I can maybe even quote some Walt Whitman for you guys to help you just get a sense of how profound and provocative this study is. First of all, and I've said this in earlier lectures, if you haven't been studying with me previous lectures, then I recommend that you hit learnstrong.net really quickly. Go and watch all of my old lectures, especially lectures 19 and 20, which kind of precede, and they are Raphael's speech. Now, we have said that the 12 books of Paradise Lost can be divided into 3 parts. Books 1 through 4 set up the storyline, and we'll summarize in a bit. Books 5, 6, 7, and 8 are this middle part of Paradise Lost, where Raphael is sent from God down to heaven, from heaven and God down to earth to have a conversation with Adam and a remarkably silent Eve. We'll point out this later. As Adam is asking questions about any number of topics in book 7, we're going to get to this question that Adam will ask about the beginning of the world and the creation of the world. This is often what we will call in academic language cosmogenic stories or myths. Now we'll talk about these kinds of cosmogenic stories or myths throughout our high school study. Of course, we've seen them in the Greek experience. We've seen them in the Native American experience as well. Let's make sure we understand this term myth. From earlier lectures, I made this clear. When we use the term myth, we're using this word as an academic term. We will not get into the debate about the truth or veracity of cosmogonic myths. No. That's the work of theologians and others. Our work here is to talk specifically about stories that explain the unexplainable. So in that regards, we'll use the term myth to identify any number of cosmogonic myths, including the Big Bang Theory. We'll talk about all of them as being myths, as we define myths, stories to explain the unexplainable. When we study cosmogonic myths of any culture, we want to show, obviously, respect, as we have said before, and we're using that, what we called in earlier lectures, the non-apologetic approach. In other words, we're not going to argue for or against a certain kind of cosmogonic myth, but rather we want to study it, we want to appreciate it, we want to look at the ways in which the myth or the story is going to present ideas about origins, okay? And we want to talk about how Milton builds off of the Genesis 1 and 2 account. We can also think about this in terms of that trajectory. Think of it. Babylonian myths give way to Hebrew and Greek myths. We'll obviously be looking at a Judeo-Christian Hebrew story in Genesis 1-2. Roman myths of origins, of course, the Christian myth of origins, as we'll talk about it here in regards to Genesis 1-2. Native American stories that are those cosmogonic myths. We study a number of those in our freshman and then in our junior year. And then, of course, the even most current understanding of Big Bang Theory, as it's sometimes referred to. All of these are stories to try to explain the most remarkable question of them all. How do you explain that we are here? Like, how do you explain origins? We can think of it as well as an early science, an attempt to try to explain what we don't yet understand. Think about this. In 1,000 years, what will they laugh at that we were convinced about in terms of our science? That's a fun question to ask, right? The cosmogonic stories or myths answer key questions. I would write these down. They answer who, what, where, when, why, and of course process how, right? So those are the questions. Let's think about for a moment why this question matters. I've often, when I lecture book 7 of Paradise Lost, I like to point out this is a really important question that a lot of people just kind of assume, oh, I'm not into religion, so I don't care about this kind of thing. To maybe frame the question of Book 7 of Paradise Lost and the creation story, let's begin by just thinking a little bit about why this matters. For example, I'm going to work with the great American philosopher Ken Wilber. I mentioned him once or twice before in a book that he published a number of years ago called Sex, Ecology, Spirituality. In the very opening of this book, in the introduction, he said the following, and I, along with a number of other readers, have found this a remarkable way to start a book. It starts out this way. It's flat out strange that anything is happening at all. There was nothing. Then a big bang. Then here we all are. This is extremely weird. To Burning's question, quote, why is there something rather than nothing, end quote, there have always been two general answers. The first might be called the philosophy of oops. The universe just occurs, there's nothing behind it, it's all ultimately accidental or random, it just is, it just happens, oops. The philosophy of oops, no matter how sophisticated and adult it may on occasion appear, its modern names and numbers are legion, from positivism to scientific materialism, from linguistic analysis to historical materialism, from naturalism to empiricism, always comes down to the same basic answer, namely, don't ask. The question itself, why is anything at all happening? Why am I here? The question itself is said to be confused, pathological, nonsensical, or infantile. To stop asking such silly or confused questions is, they all maintain, the mark of maturity, the sign of growing up in this cosmos. I don't think so. I think the answer these modern and mature disciples and disciplines give, namely, oops, and therefore don't ask, is about as infantile a response as the human condition could possibly offer. The other broad answer that has been tendered is that something else is going on. Behind the happenstance drama is a deeper or higher or wider pattern or order or intelligence. There are, of course, many varieties of this deeper order: the Tao, God, Geist, Mat, archetypal forms, reason, Li, Mahamya, Brahman, Rigpa. And although these different varieties of the deeper order certainly disagree with each other at many points, they all agree on this. The universe is not what it appears. Something else is going on, something quite other than oops, end quote. Now, I find this a fascinating way to begin our conversation. The obvious question is, why do people seek meaning? Are we special? And if so, why? Origin myths and cosmogenic myths, of course, try to answer many of these questions. Or think about this one. We hold these truths to be self-evident, right? 1776, the founding document of America, right? That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Wow. Creator? Now, of course, let's point out, Jefferson is what we will call today a deist. That is to say, in earlier language that we've used in other lectures, he believes in a more transpersonal kind of deity, very similar to Ken Wilber's view. And yet, it does beg a question. Do you have to believe in a creator to believe in rights? I'm just asking questions here to make us begin to think. Now, to begin, and for a number of years I was lecturing this book 7 without maybe realizing thoroughly the ways in which many of my students did not understand the Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 account that is central to being able to read Paradise Lost Book 7. When Milton publishes in 1667 Paradise Lost and Book 7, he of course is able to work off of the assumption that everybody pretty much knows what's going on. The Genesis 1 and 2 account we have to spend a few minutes with, so let's take some notes. Lots of scholars have talked about an important year in the history of the Hebrew people, when Jerusalem falls in 586 to the Babylonians, and there is an exile that's referred to as the Babylonian exile. I've mentioned this in other lectures, but let's just quickly summarize. There is a huge argument that says that when the Hebrew people find themselves living in exile in Babylon, not believing that they will be able to return back to Jerusalem, they go through a process that will, in the end, produce some of their most important works of literature and theology. For example, many of the ideas about origin stories, many scholars have pointed out, sound remarkably similar to some of the notions of Babylonian cosmogonic myths. Now I'm going to let you do some of your own research on this idea, but you'll be interested maybe to see the relationship there. Okay? Think about this. In 1611, just a few months after Milton is born in 1608, the King James Version of the Bible is published. Milton would have known the language of Genesis 1 and 2 very well. And in the process, he knew the translation as he was preparing Paradise Lost Book 7. You're going to have a whole lot better time reading Book 7 of Paradise Lost if you feel comfortable with Genesis 1 and 2. So I think it makes sense to just pick up that text, find it online if you need to, and let's read it together. Now, let me give you a little activity as we get into this. Two things. One, I recommend, especially if this is new information to you, that you outline the days of creation as we go through this. Two, we said that cosmogonic stories answer those major questions of who, what, where, when, why, and how. As we go through this reading, just start to already take some notes. By the way, you'll be setting yourselves up for the annotative work of Book 7 of Paradise Lost, because ostensibly Milton lifts directly out of this reading much of what it is he's going to say. Now, let's go ahead and say it out loud. Milton's poetry, as we've said before, is remarkable, so we're going to pay attention as we go through this process. But let's pay attention to just the reading itself. I'm just going to read for you Genesis 1 and 2. And of course, my love of the King James Version of the Bible, some of the really, I believe, the high watermark in many ways of early Middle English. Let's pay attention now. Genesis 1 and 2. By the way, I'm just going to read this. I'm not going to point out each verse or anything like that, nor will I probably do much pausing. I'm just going to read it. Enjoy the language. And again, if this is brand new to you, I definitely recommend that you take some very thorough notes here. What happens for each day of the Genesis 1 and the Genesis 2 account? I will point out, many biblical scholars from the 18th century on begin to point out that it appears maybe that there's two actual creation accounts here, and not one. I'll leave that one up to you in your own study as well. Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, "Let there be firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament, and divided the waters from which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven." And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the 5th day. And God said, Let the earth bring forth a living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, Let us make man in our image. Verse 26, by the way. And God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and every fowl of the air, and everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I've given every green herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the 6th day. Genesis chapter 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the 7th day, and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth, when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. And every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. But there went up a mist from the earth, and watered the whole face of the ground. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight, and good for food. The tree of life also in the middle of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted, and became into 4 heads. The name of the first is Pishon, which compresseth the whole land of Hivala, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is good. There is Bedlam and onyx stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is that compresseth the whole land of Ethiopia. And the name of the third river is Hiddekel, which goeth toward the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is Euphrates. And the Lord God took the man, and put him into the garden of Eden to dress it, and to keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest eat freely. Verse 17. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. And the Lord God said, It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helpmeet for him. And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field, and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam, to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name thereof. And Adam gave names to all the cattle, and to the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helpmeet for him. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, and he closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib, which the Lord God had taken from the man, made he a woman, and brought her unto the man. And Adam said, This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of a man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, and the man and his wife were not ashamed. Now, just real quickly, and I appreciate that you've had some patience here to at least hear the reading of Genesis 1 and 2. Here's the challenge. When you pick up Book 7 of Paradise Lost, if you don't know what we just read, if you don't understand what Milton is playing with as he goes forward, then a whole lot of what goes on in Paradise Lost Book 7 is kind of lost on you, and this is why I've kind of taken our time. Now, let's just point out the obvious questions, and there are a whole bunch of them, and scholars have spent a lot of time back and forth on these. I want to point out, by the way, that every challenge that can be made about the readings of Genesis 1 and 2 have had many, many apologists, individuals who defend and answer these questions. So let's just, like for example, the question, how can you have light without the sun? The sun, of course, not being created until several days into the creation story. Of course, let's play the game, though, of who, what, where, when, why, and how. Who? Well, according to Genesis 1 and 2, it's God or Spirit. In Paradise Lost, though, you're going to notice Milton plays a little bit of a game by saying that it is the Son who does the creation and not specifically God, although, of course, a Trinitarian understanding of the Godhead would allow for the Son to be understood as God. The second question, what? Well, of course, creation of everything. Of course, that's a question mark, right? Because in our reading already, water seems to already be there, right? There seems to be no mention that God creates that watery surface or chaos or whatever it is. Where? Well, this is a tough one. Of course, the Euphrates is mentioned in the Babylonian area, and of course many people will argue that this is one of those renderings of at least an example of how maybe that notion of coming out of the exile of Babylon influenced thinking here. When? In the beginning. Let's pause for a moment though and point out that this is Aristotle's challenge of that first mover or that first cause, and of course the need to believe in something that's a first cause, or you have ultimate infinite regress. As any number of scholars have pointed out, though, well, infinite regress, of course, still begs the question, who created God? And then, of course, we are back to this notion of infinite regress. The why question, well, that one's kind of uncertain in the Genesis 1-2 account. For Milton, however, we're going to find out in Book 7 that the creation has a lot to do with the fact that there needs to be a repeopling, this is Milton's language,